If memory slips have started to bother you, forgetting a name, losing a word mid-sentence, or walking into a room and wondering why, you're not alone. And no, this doesn't mean your mind is failing. For many people, these moments are unsettling not because they're severe, but because they feel unfamiliar. You've always trusted your mind. You've relied on it. So when it hesitates, even briefly, it creates doubt. But here's something important that often gets missed. What usually changes first isn't intelligence, awareness, or who you are as a person. It's how efficiently the brain is being supported. As the years go on, the brain becomes less forgiving of small gaps in fuel, protection, and circulation. When those needs aren't met consistently, thinking can feel slower, recall less reliable, and mental energy easier to drain. Not because the brain is broken, but because it's working with less backup than it used to. That's why memory changes often feel subtle at first. Not dramatic, not obvious, just off. You may notice it when reading takes more effort, when conversations feel harder to follow, when mental fatigue shows up sooner than it once did. Most advice jumps straight to puzzles, supplements, or vague instructions like keep your brain active. And while those can help, they often overlook something basic but powerful. The brain is an organ. And like every other organ, it responds to nourishment. It needs steady fuel. It needs protection from daily stress, and it needs reliable circulation to keep signals moving clearly. Certain fruits provide exactly that kind of support. Support the brain uses every single day to maintain communication between cells, protect memory pathways, and keep mental clarity from slipping faster than it has to. Not all fruits do this equally, and more is not always better. In this video, we're going to focus on 3 specific fruits and why they matter for memory, especially as the brain's needs change with time. No exaggeration, no miracle claims. Just clear explanations, practical insight, and simple ways to support mental clarity and confidence using foods your body already understands. Let's start with the first fruit and how it helps protect memory before small lapses turn into lasting frustration. But before that, make sure to like and subscribe this channel. We made this channel so you can improve your health and have a healthy comeback. Let's start with the first fruit because this one is about protecting memory, not trying to boost it. That fruit is blueberries. As we get older, memory changes are often less about losing ability and more about gradual wear. The brain is constantly working, processing information, filtering noise, storing details, and over time, that daily workload takes a toll on brain cells and the connections between them. Blueberries help by acting as a shield. They support the brain's natural defenses against everyday stress that slowly wears down memory pathways. When that stress builds up, signaling becomes less reliable. That's when words sit on the tip of your tongue, concentration fades sooner, or your mind feels tired halfway through a conversation. Blueberries don't push the brain to perform, they help it hold its ground. They create a calmer environment for brain cells, which helps communication stay clearer and more consistent. That's why the benefit often shows up in ordinary moments, not dramatic ones. People notice fewer blank pauses when speaking. They stay mentally engaged longer while reading or listening. And mental fatigue doesn't arrive as early in the day. Another important role blueberries play is keeping background inflammation in check. This kind of inflammation doesn't hurt, but it quietly interferes with memory signals. By helping reduce that interference, blueberries allow existing brain connections to function more smoothly. What makes blueberries especially practical is how little effort they require. A small handful a few times a week is enough to support this protective effect. Fresh or frozen both work well, and they fit easily into meals without changing habits. This isn't about sharpening memory overnight. It's about preserving clarity before it slips. And that distinction matters because protecting memory is far easier than trying to restore it later. Next, we'll look at what happens when this kind of protection is used consistently and how people often notice the difference in everyday thinking, not tests or numbers. When blueberries are used consistently, the change people notice isn't dramatic, it's reassuring. Memory doesn't suddenly feel sharper, it feels more reliable. The first difference often shows up in everyday situations. Conversations feel easier to follow, words come back faster instead of stalling mid-sentence. Reading feels less tiring, even toward the end of an article or a book chapter. That's because blueberries aren't trying to speed the brain up, They help reduce the background noise that makes thinking feel scattered. Over time, many people describe fewer moments where the mind goes blank under mild pressure, like being asked a question unexpectedly or trying to recall a name quickly. The information is still there, it just comes forward with less effort. Another change people notice is mental stamina. Tasks that require focused listening, planning, remembering details don't drain energy as quickly. The brain feels steadier instead of sharp one moment and foggy the next. This matters because mental fatigue often gets mistaken for memory loss. When the brain tires easily, recall feels unreliable even when memory is intact. Blueberries help by supporting consistency, not intensity. There's also a confidence effect that builds quietly. When recall works more often than it fails, people stop bracing themselves for mistakes. That reduction in anxiety alone improves memory performance. The mind works better when it isn't constantly on guard. Blueberries fit best when treated as maintenance. A small amount, used regularly, gives the brain a protective baseline it can rely on. More isn't better. Sporadic use isn't as helpful. Think of blueberries the way you'd think of maintaining eyesight or balance, not upgrading them, but keeping them steady. That's why blueberries come first on this list. They don't enhance memory. They help preserve confidence in it. Next, we'll move to a fruit that supports memory from a completely different angle, by helping the brain stay fueled and responsive throughout the day, not just protected. Let's move to the next fruit, because this one supports memory in a very different way. This isn't about protection, it's about reducing delay. That fruit is banana. Many memory lapses aren't caused by loss or damage. They happen because the brain isn't fully available at the moment it needs to respond. The information is there, but access is slow. That's when you pause mid-sentence. That's when a word comes a few seconds late. That's when your mind feels like it's buffering. Bananas help with that specific issue. They provide steady, usable fuel that helps the brain stay responsive throughout the day. Not stimulation, not a surge. Just enough support to keep thinking from lagging when demand increases. The brain uses a large share of the body's energy even during simple tasks. When that energy supply dips, the brain shifts into conservation mode. Thinking slows, focus slips, recall feels delayed, even though memory itself hasn't changed. Bananas help prevent those dips. They also provide vitamin B6, which supports how brain cells pass messages between each other. When signaling slows, thoughts don't flow smoothly. You know what you want to say, but it takes longer to get there. Supporting that communication helps thoughts connect with less friction. People who include bananas regularly often notice fewer pauses during conversation, quicker access to familiar words, and less mental drag when switching between tasks or ideas. This fruit works best earlier in the day or alongside meals when the brain needs reliable support. It doesn't act like caffeine. It doesn't push alertness. It simply keeps the brain supplied so it can respond when needed. Bananas don't protect memory like blueberries do. They don't enhance memory either. They help the brain stay ready. And readiness is often the difference between feeling forgetful and feeling mentally steady. Next, we'll look at what consistent support from bananas feels like over time and why steady availability matters more than people expect. When bananas are used consistently, the change people notice isn't sharper memory or sudden clarity. It's less resistance when thinking. The brain feels smoother to use. Instead of pausing to gather thoughts, responses come more naturally. Instead of feeling mentally a step behind, you stay present in the moment. The mind doesn't feel rushed, but it also doesn't feel sluggish. This shows up in small, everyday ways that matter more than tests or scores. You answer questions without that extra beat of silence. You follow conversations without losing your thread. You move from one idea to the next without feeling mentally stuck. These moments are important because they shape confidence. When recall is delayed, people often start doubting themselves. They hesitate. They speak less. They withdraw from conversations, not because memory is gone, but because access feels unreliable. Bananas help reduce that hesitation. By keeping brain energy steady, they reduce the need for the brain to constantly save power. That conservation mode is what creates mental lag. When fuel is available, the brain stays responsive instead of guarded. Over time, people also notice fewer mental drop-offs during the day. Focus doesn't fade as suddenly in the afternoon. Tasks that require attention reading, organizing thoughts, remembering steps, feel more manageable without needing breaks as often. There's also a calming effect that builds quietly. When the brain doesn't feel rushed or underpowered, anxiety around forgetting eases. That alone improves recall. Memory works best when the mind isn't bracing for failure. Bananas work best when they're treated as support, not a fix. One banana a few times a week, especially earlier in the day or alongside meals, is enough to maintain this steady availability. There's no need to overdo it. This fruit doesn't change what you know. It changes how easily you can get to what you know. And for many people, that difference is what restores confidence in their memory. Next, we'll move to the final fruit one that supports memory when the brain is resting, resetting, and preparing for the next day. Let's move to the final fruit, because this one supports memory at a time most people don't think about. Not while you're thinking, not while you're talking, but while the brain is at rest. That fruit is avocado. A lot of memory support doesn't happen during active thinking. It happens when the brain is calm during rest, downtime, and sleep. That's when connections are stabilized, signals are organized, and the brain prepares itself to function smoothly the next day. Avocados support that quiet process. They provide healthy fats that help maintain the structure of brain cells and the connections between them. The brain relies on this structure to keep signals clear and stable. When that support weakens, memory doesn't disappear, but it starts to feel unreliable. You know the information is there, but you don't fully trust it. That's where avocados matter. They help keep memory pathways intact so recall feels steadier instead of fragile. Thoughts feel more organized. Mental clarity feels more settled. And the mind doesn't feel as scattered, especially after a poor night of sleep. This is why the effect of avocados often feels calm rather than noticeable. There's no sudden boost, no rush of alertness, just a sense that thinking holds together better over time. People who include avocados regularly often report fewer moments of second-guessing themselves. They trust their recall more. They feel less anxious about forgetting, and that confidence alone improves memory performance. Avocados don't stimulate the brain. They don't sharpen it. They help it stay intact and stable. This fruit works best as part of regular meals, especially later in the day when the body is shifting from activity into recovery. A few servings a week is enough to support this stabilizing effect. Blueberries help protect memory. Bananas help the brain stay responsive. And avocados help memory hold together, so confidence doesn't fade even when the day has been long. Next, we'll look at what consistent avocado use feels like over time and how this kind of stability supports long-term trust in your memory, not just short-term clarity. When avocados are used consistently, the change people notice isn't faster thinking or sharper recall, it's stability. Memory feels less like something you have to manage and more like something you can rely on. Instead of wondering whether a thought will come back when you need it, recall feels grounded. You stop bracing yourself for mistakes. The mind feels supported, even on days when sleep wasn't perfect or stress was higher than usual. This matters because memory issues often become stressful before they become serious. People start rehearsing words before speaking. They hesitate mid-conversation. They double-check themselves even when they're probably right. That constant self-monitoring creates tension. And tension is one of the fastest ways to disrupt recall. Avocados help interrupt that loop. They act like a foundation, something memory can rest on instead of wobbling. Thoughts feel more organized. Information doesn't feel like it's slipping through gaps, and recall feels calmer, not rushed. Over time, many people notice fewer, "Did I already forget that?" moments. Conversations feel easier, and the mental noise around forgetting begins to fade. This effect is especially noticeable after rest. When the brain has had steady support overnight, mornings feel clearer. Thinking doesn't need as much warming up, and memory feels ready instead of fragile. Avocados don't push the brain to perform. They don't try to speed anything up. They help memory hold together, so yesterday's thinking doesn't undermine today's confidence. That's why they work best as a steady habit, not an occasional add-on. A few servings per week, used naturally with meals, is enough to support this grounding effect. Avocados don't improve memory in a dramatic way. They restore trust in memory. And for many people, that trust is what brings back calm, confidence, and ease in everyday thinking. Here's the most important thing to take away from this. Memory doesn't need to be pushed. It doesn't need to be tested, forced, or constantly corrected. It needs to be supported so it can be trusted again. When the brain feels protected from daily wear, steadily fueled during the day, and properly supported during rest, memory stops feeling fragile. Thinking feels calmer, recall feels more reliable, and the quiet worry around forgetting begins to loosen its grip. That's the real shift. Not sharper performance, not trying harder, but restoring confidence in how your mind already works. You now understand the pattern. Small, steady support works better than pressure every time. You don't need to change everything. You don't need perfect habits. And you don't need to measure every result. Start with one fruit. Use it consistently. Then simply notice how your thinking feels in real moments during conversations, when making decisions, or in the morning when the day begins. Those moments tell you more than any test ever could. And if memory changes have been worrying you, remember this: decline is not the same as failure. Many changes are about missing support, not loss. Your brain hasn't stopped working. It just responds better when it feels calm, steady, and supported. Before you go, I'd like you to do 3 simple things. First, if this explanation helped you see memory differently, tap the like button so more people who need calm, clear guidance can find it. Second, subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this, focused on understanding the body, not scaring it. And finally, take a moment and leave a comment below. Tell me which fruit you're starting with, or what part of this made the most sense to you. That reflection matters more than you might think. We're building a community here for strong comebacks, so subscribe, hit the bell icon. You don't want to miss what's coming next. If this was helpful and you want to support the effort behind it, give this video a like and share it with someone you love. Join me in the next video. I've got more surprises waiting for you.